Oh, hi, I'm Ian Mean. I'm Director of Business West in Gloucestershire. I'm talking to Claire Ralph. Claire is the Policy and Projects Manager for Business West. And she's talking to me about the end of the furlough scheme this weekend and the start of a new government support scheme for jobs.
Thanks, Ian. Yes, so the new job support scheme starts on Sunday. We haven't seen the full guidance from the Treasury yet, so that's expected tomorrow. But that's going to be quite a shift for employers and businesses in our region.
What does it mean?
There are actually two schemes under the job support scheme, but the one I'll focus on today is the job support scheme open, which are for businesses that are not mandatorily closed, but may have a reduced income and a reduced demand for their employees to work. So under the scheme, the employer has to provide enough work and pay for at least 20% of their employees' time. And for the rest of the time that the employee is not working, they make a small contribution to the wages for that time. And that's topped up by the government. So the employee takes at least 67% of their normal salary home in their pay bill, in the pay slip each month. And the employer has to pay a contribution to those hours that are not worked, but that's quite a modest contribution.
Now that modest contribution is what, 5%?
Yeah, so it's 5% plus the national insurance contributions and the mandatory pension contributions per individual employee.
Now, is this going to help companies, do you think?
Yeah, so some changes were made last week to make the job support scheme much more affordable for businesses to actually use. The contributions are quite modest, but the employer does have to have enough work for the employee to do for that 20% of their time, their contractual hours. So it's not a silver bullet. The scheme will not be usable if the business has got no demand. So sectors such as the events industry in our region, that they haven't had any events since March, they don't have any income, they're not going to be able to keep their staff and pay the 5%, nor are they going to have enough work for their employees to do 20% of their normal hours. There are still some gaps, and the scheme's quite complicated, and there is some eligibility criteria for businesses to think quite carefully about. The most significant issue with the scheme at the moment, and I've only seen some draft guidance because the final guidance hasn't yet been published, but the employee has to have been employed on the 23rd of September, and they have had to be included on a payroll return to HMRC before the 23rd of September. So one potential gap is if a business has taken on an employee, say at the start of September, because they might have been a new graduate or a school leaver, but they haven't paid them before the 23rd of September. They won't be able to actually put that employee through the job support scheme because they won't have made that payroll return for that employee by the 23rd of September. The other problem is if you have employed someone prior to the 23rd of September but let them go and you're looking to rehire them, they weren't employed by your business on the 23rd of September, and actually you also can't use this job support scheme for that employee. So those are two big areas for businesses to look out for, both pivoting around a date that's now in the past and doesn't really mean that much for businesses in our region.
Claire, it sounds quite complex.
Yes, it is. It's broadly modelled on the job retention scheme, the furlough scheme, but you don't have to have used the job retention scheme in order to use job support scheme. But yes, it is very complicated. And then there's a totally separate scheme called the Job Support Scheme Closed, which provides support where the government's contribution pays the full salary of the worker for businesses where the premises for their employer is mandatorily closed. So pubs and bars in tier 3 areas, which don't affect the southwest at the moment, but the level of COVID is climbing in our region, so that might become relevant into the future.
How long does this last, this new scheme?
It's running for 6 months. The government has already said that they're going to review it in January to see how it's operating. And they obviously can make any changes in January for the scheme operating between then and towards the end of March, beginning of April. But yes, it's currently modelled to work for 6 months, but with that break clause, with a government review in January.
Now, it starts on Sunday, but as you were telling me earlier, you really haven't got any more detail than what you've said.
Yeah, so I've seen some draft materials through the British Chambers of Commerce network, but we haven't seen final guidance yet. That's expected tomorrow, and I'll be doing some analysis when that comes out and placing that on the Trading Through Coronavirus hub. I don't expect there to be major changes, though, between what was announced last week and the guidance. I do expect the guidance to be very detailed because the scheme is very complex.
Good. Thank you, Claire.
You're welcome, Ian.